What up, dude? And welcome to the Kurt Steele Podcast, your trusted source for Detroit Lions news and rumors. Today, Kent Platte, aka Math Bomb, NFL Analytics and Applications Development for Pro Football Network, and creator of the Relative Athletic Score, or the RAS score, as we know it out here in the Twitterverse. And today, he's on the show to talk about some positions or players that the Detroit Lions may need in the mid to late rounds of the NFL draft. He's a Lions fan, people. So let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Kent.
Thanks for having me on, man. Glad to be here.
All right. So how long have you been working for or with Pro Football Network? And what is your role over there?
It's been a couple of years. I'm actually the curator of their mock draft simulator. I'm sure you guys have been out there and seen that or seen people post their mock drafts. I didn't create it, but I am the one that maintains the algorithm and updates it and make sure that we have all the different trade stuff. Everything kind of makes sense logically within it. I know everybody likes to get those big trades, but there is logic that goes behind when those are made and what actual compensation is being given up for it. But yeah, I've been doing that for, I think, 3 years now. It's been a lot of fun.
Okay, now here's the big thing, because I know everyone sees this out in the Twitterverse. Along with it goes with the mock drafts. You are the inventor of the Relative Athletic Score, or RAS. Please explain what the RAS is and how it's used.
RAS is a 0 to 10 comparative metric. It is a metric that takes a player's athletic testing and compares it historically to players at their position, so their peers, from 1987 until that player's draft year. So we got 36 years, or however many years that is. I'm good at math, but I didn't do that math beforehand. So it just puts the score on a 0 to 10 scale. The idea was to create something that contextualizes the data in a meaningful way. Because if you hear that a guy runs a 4.52, that's great. If you know what a 4.52 is, that's fantastic for most positions. But it means something different for a wide receiver than it does for a defensive end. If a wide receiver runs a 4.52, you're like, okay, that's okay. That's decent speed. You could probably be a lot faster, but that's okay. Defensive end runs a 4.52. That's fantastic. You want that guy to run a 4.52. That's exactly what you're looking for. But they mean very different things. Same thing for the other scores. A 5 flat on the 40-yard dash means something very different for an offensive lineman than it does for a cornerback. One of those is fantastic. The other one is undraftable. Big difference. You put that on a 0 to 10 scale, it's much more understandable. That's going to be an 8 or 9 for an offensive lineman. It's going to be like a 0 or a 1 for a cornerback. 8 or 9 out of 10, really good. 0 or 1 out of 10, not so much.
Right. And how do most fans use your RAS score when they're looking for their mock draft?
A lot of times people are paying attention to it just to look for the type of guy they're already thinking of, right? You're looking for a big athletic corner and you use a tool like RAS, you're going to look for a guy who has a higher size score, because that's going to be their size compared to their position group. So if they have a higher score, they're big for their position group. Makes sense, right? You want a guy that's fast, you're going to look for a guy that has tested well in the 40-yard dash. And it's a lot easier to have that color-coded and 0 to 10 scale for a metric than try to figure out for yourself whether a 4.47 is good. Jeff Okudah ran a 4.47, and there were people talking about, oh, he's slow. And it's like, that is not slow for a cornerback. I mean, it's not a 4.3. You'd prefer a guy who runs much faster, but 4.47 is still fast for a corner. That's perfectly fine. It's not a bad test. So people use it more to confirm the things that they're already expecting. A lot of times people will type based on their team. That's one of the things I've been working on the past couple of days. You've been following my feed about the types of players that NFL teams covet. And now I have a way to kind of visualize that as well. And you can look up which players are on the roster and figure out, okay, they tend to like guys that have, maybe they're smaller in stature, but they're really fast. Lions linebackers, for instance, currently under Brad Holmes. Matt Patricia liked guys that were big and didn't care about speed. So high size, low speed. Brad Holmes doesn't do that. Brad Holmes doesn't care about size all that much, but he does want those guys to be fast and explosive. So fans will look at it and try to figure out what their team wants and then try to find guys that fit those molds.
Okay, we're talking about your fandom. We talked about that earlier. You're a Detroit Lions fan. Give me your thoughts on the current state of the Detroit Lions.
The Detroit Lions are in a really interesting position. They're in year 3 of a rebuild. They've still got plenty of needs. I mean, I know a lot of Lions fans like to sit back and be like, "Oh yeah, we went 9-7 last year. That was so much better than expectations." Or 9-8. And so it's so much better than expectations. You know, we're headed to the Super Bowl. We're headed to our first playoff win in however many years, and you got to pump the brakes a little bit. You don't got to go straight into full on hater mode. But you always want to look objectively at your roster and try to figure out the positions that they still need help at. And the Detroit Lions still need a lot of help on defense. They need to get some help in their secondary. Jeff Okudah had a really good year last year compared to his previous couple, but it wasn't a great year by a corner. And part of that was that their pass rush didn't really pick up until later in the season. Pass rush is another area where some Lions fans tend to think that they're pretty set, because they had James Houston come on late in the year, and they had Aiden Hutchinson with a fantastic rookie season. Both those things are great. You want those types of things, but you still have to pay attention to depth. You still have to pay attention to the guys that are going to round out your roster and what those contracts look like. Because when you sign a player to a second contract, even a depth player, it's at a higher dollar value than what you would have getting a rookie. And sometimes teams just take that value and be like, well, I'll just draft another guy, you know? The Lions need help almost everywhere on their defense. There's a couple of starters they have in place, but they could use pretty much any position on defense. And then on offense, they need another guard, because Vaitai is likely walking out the door. They've had a lot of injuries along that offensive line. There's possibility they're looking for a tackle successor, not a replacement, but just a successor for Taylor Decker on the left side. There are people who believe that the Lions need a quarterback. I tend to be one of those people. I'm one of those guys where you either have that elite franchise quarterback or you don't. So it's possible the Lions are looking at quarterback, and they're probably going to get another running back. I expect Jamal Williams to return as the character of the Lions offense. But as great as he is and as fun as he is off the field, on the field, he's a relatively simple runner, right? He's a reliable guy that you can give the football to and move the football down the field, but he doesn't really give you a whole lot in terms of play calling versatility. And DeAndre Swift just hasn't been able to stay healthy enough to be that guy. So it's possible the Lions are looking there as well. I think their wide receiver core is pretty good. I don't think they really care about the tight end position. So I don't really think that they're going to jump on that. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, they're going to draft another first-round tight end," going for some kind of record for most tight ends drafted in the first round in a team's history if they don't already have it. But more likely, I think if they do focus on offense, it's either going to be a quarterback if they think they need one, running back, guard, and then potentially rounding out the wide receiver and tight end groups early day 3, possibly.
Okay, so let's put your general manager hat on there, Math Bomb. Are there players or positions that you feel the Lions should be targeting in the mid to late rounds of the upcoming draft? Because everyone talks about the first round draft picks, the day 1 guys, but let's look at the mid to late round guys. So are there any positions or players you're looking at for the Lions in those rounds?
Absolutely. And it's a really good way to look at the draft, because like you said, everybody kind of knows the biggest needs that a team has. But once you get into the depth, it's a little bit harder to figure out where those cracks are, right? The Lions offensive line was a big strength of the team in 2022. Even with the injuries and the stuff that they dealt with, it was a stronger position group on the team. Their depth, however, really got tested because of those injuries that they had to deal with. And you're not going to be able to hold on to the same guys forever. Eventually, guys like Evan Brown are going to move on. Dan Skipper got tested and it looked good for a hot minute and then didn't so much after that. They've really got to start trying to find ways to plug any potential holes that they can get on that offensive line. I mentioned running back as a group I think that they might look into. That's more for the guy that they want to jump into that role. But if they bring Jamal Williams back and they want to run a power type running offense, they might view that scat back type role as a secondary need and start looking at that in day 3 rather than day 1 or 2. Defensively, again, it could be anywhere that they really want to start looking for guys. As much as they need a starter on the interior of their defensive line, I think they might be set on the depth side there. As much as they need a starting corner, I think the guys that they have in reserve in their cornerback position are pretty good for the roles that they play. Safety, they could probably use guys at every level of that. And then linebacker, they're so thin at linebacker, like completely up and down. They're so thin at linebacker. They really need to pull in multiple positions or multiple guys if they can this offseason. And I think that's what they're going to end up ultimately doing is bringing in a couple of guys.
Okay, we've been talking with Kent Platte, aka Math Bomb. He is the creator or the inventor of the RAS score. He works over there at Pro Football Network. Please tell the audience how they can find you and your content on social media.
You can always check out the website, ras.football. Everything up there is free. All of my data you can download. The individual testing metrics you can't, but the RAS data, the draft data, all that stuff's available for download from the main page. I'm trying to add a whole bunch of new visualization content. I mentioned before that I had a breakdown of position and roster across the NFL based on all NFL teams and all NFL positions. All that stuff's available on the website for free. I don't ever charge for that content. You can find my Twitter handle at MathBomb. I'm always on there talking about football. Love interacting with fans and people who are trying to get into the NFL world. And then, of course, you can go play the mock draft simulator at profootballnetwork.com/mock draft and be your own GM and tell us who the Lions are going to take.
Yeah. Thank you again for joining me, Kent. Hey, you can find me at kurtsteele.com or follow me on Twitter at kurtsteele14. Thank you for joining me right here on the Kurt Steele podcast, your trusted source for Detroit Lions news and rumors. This is Kurt Steele, and I will holla at you real soon.